Okay, I think we might start because we only have 30 minutes. We don't have very long. Good morning, everybody. I hope you are all well this morning. My name is Lissa Feeney. I am CEO and founder at Kinore Finance and Business Services, and delighted to be joined by Susan Hayes Culleton this morning. Good morning, Susan.
Morning, Larissa. Thanks so much for having me.
Susan, would you mind giving us a little bit of an introduction to yourself for those of you who might be live this morning or listening to the recording?
Sure. So my name is Susan Hayes Culleton, as Larissa said, and I set up a company 15 years ago now called Hayes Culleton. And within that, there's a variety of different parts to it. We have Savvy Teens, which is a transition year work experience business. We have a financial training business. And then there's also the speaking and MC side. We also work with a company called VectorVest in the US, where we take care of the European business development and support side as well. And in the past year and a quarter at this stage, I'm also the presenter of Taking Stock on Newstalk and have written 7 books, including the latest Leaving Cert Economics textbook, with two with
Seven books.
co-authors over the years, I will say.
7 books. I did not know it was that many. I still have your first one up there on the shelf. Okay, thank you very much, Susan. Does anybody hear a big echo? I don't hear an echo. Susan, do you hear an echo?
I don't, Larissa. No, I'm just checking
Okay.
my microphone there as well, and I think I'm just going to my speaker there just in case there's any issue. But I can hear you fine.
Okay. So maybe if anybody else has problems, let us know. Okay, for those of you on the call, I am just launching a poll with a couple of questions there. So if you can please take during the next 30 minutes or so, answer that poll, we'd be very grateful. Okay, Susan. So today we're here to talk about the value equation. So we're talking about pricing, buyer behavior, and the decisions that every business and indeed every individual must make. So the first, where we're going to go first is the current economic environment, your area of expertise, and how the current environment is changing the way consumers and businesses make purchasing decisions. What are you
Okay.
seeing?
So first off, I mean, inflation is the name of the game. It has been for the past 5 years for different reasons. In from 21 to 23, we saw the really high inflation years in particular. That was created from a variety of places. One was the pent-up demand from COVID. Two was a lot of spending in the US around the Inflation Reduction Act, the Green Agenda. Then, of course, we also had the invasion into Ukraine, and particularly that exacerbated inflation pressures in Europe given the price of energy and, of course, then subsequently as well, the price of food. So just to put all of this into context, Larissa, the cost of living today in comparison to 2021 is actually a quarter higher. So whatever people would have been spending 5 years ago, that might have cost them €1 is now costing 1.25. So as a result, that's really, really significant from that point of view. In addition, then when we move on from there, the consequence of that tend to be that people can be more aware of this, certainly, and become more price sensitive. So in delivering value for money, it was always important. It will ever be important. But there is that consequence there of making sure that you're thinking through the value for money that you've got. But the second thing, and businesses need to be aware of this as well, is that there's also now a culture of almost expectation that companies will rise their prices. There's also a sense of it's everywhere. And I'm not saying that people take it easy or lying down. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that there is a greater culture of doing that versus when you're in a very deflationary or a very price stable environment. The second thing as well when it comes to purchasing decisions is in relation to tech. If we look at the price of Salesforce, for example, on the stock market, or if we look at any of SaaS type companies, except Microsoft, keep that to the side there for a moment. But if we just look at that, what we can see as well is that a lot of SaaS-based companies that aren't innovating fast enough, people are simply moving away from. So if I give a very small example, like we would have been a subscriber to Dropbox over the years and used it. I mean, it did the job. It held everything. One could share. Sorry, I'm just seeing there now. Somebody is just saying Susan must decrease sound on her computer. I can hear her twice. So I don't quite know where that is coming from. I've only joined once, so I'm not entirely sure where that is coming from.
Yeah.
Okay, well
I, I can't hear you twice, Susan. I can't. I'm not too sure now.
Yeah.
Pat has said that his sound is sorted. Sharon has said sounds fine for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I think it might be you, Petros, if you can have a look at how you at your sound. Okay. Thanks,
Perfect.
Susan. Go ahead. Sorry
So
to. Okay.
sure. Yep. Certainly, I do find that in the area of tech in particular, that because of vibe coding, because of AI, because of the evolving nature of technology, is that there's. So I was mentioning there, Dropbox, for example. Then we moved over to Microsoft 365. Since OneDrive came with that, well, then we just cancelled Dropbox, even though the service was there and all that sort of thing. So from that point of view, if you're in a tech business, and specifically if you're in software as a service business, there is such a speed and an expectation of an AI stack being developed that really puts pressure on anybody delivering that sort of service. And then, of course, anybody who's borrowing, anybody who's exposed to borrowing, whether it's personal or whether it's household, we are seeing an upward bias now. Here in Ireland, of course, we have the ECB. They put up interest rates by 0.25% 2 weeks ago. It's looking like, based on inflation, that is having a spillover effect from what's going on in Iran, and even though we've now seen a light, but a peace deal there of sorts, we'll see how that stays put. Since energy prices have fallen, that may have a knock-on effect. But even in the meantime, there's been such damage done to the infrastructure over there, and because wages and so on, a lot of the price level that increased has spilled over into second-order effects. So, in summary, I would say number one, that inflationary environment pushes people to look for more value for money, but also culturally creates the environment for businesses to have a more conducive environment to increase prices, which sounds ironic, but it's important not to avoid that. Second thing, in terms of loyalty to tech, unless you're innovating and unless you're weaving AI into your tech stack, it's very, very hard to hold on to customers. And number three, in interest rates, it looks like the price of borrowing is increasing, and that, sitting here talking to you today, live today, it looks like that is set to increase.
Okay. So you've answered. Thank you for that. You've answered one of the questions that came in, I think. The question was, do we see a trend for consumer spending on quality rather than cheap and badly made, and how to best price luxury items? So you've said that people are looking for value. So are
Mm.
they more likely to spend on higher value items rather than cheap?
Okay, I don't think I can answer that with very broad brush strokes. I think something that I find myself talking about more and more, Larissa, is the K-shaped economy. And the K-shaped economy is where people are moving in two different directions. And I think I could characterize, rather than looking at like high income and low income, because if you're creating a luxury product, and what I don't know from that question is whether that person is selling business to consumer or business to business. Ordinarily, we usually hear about luxury in the context of business to consumer, and there that customer, I'm guessing, is there for somebody who has got high income or high wealth, and is in a position where that's likely growing. If they're investing in assets, it likely is. If they're working in an environment in high skills demand, they likely are as well. On the other hand, when you talk about buying cheap, I am. I don't know whether cheap means low quality, or it means inexpensive, or it means dropping down a tier, etc. But the consumer on the other side is really under pressure. The person, like I say, the person whose wages hasn't kept up with that 25% increase in the cost of living over 5 years. So in order to answer that question, I would say that business needs to really understand the direction that their customer is going on, which side of the K shape, and then tying into how that factors in. But certainly one, and I'll probably give several book recommendations during this. One book that I suggest people read is Same as Ever by Morgan Housel. He's also the guy that wrote The Psychology of Money, another great read. Both very easy to consume reads, but powerful and punchy in their effect. And we tend, all the time on the show, Larissa, we talk about things that are changing. But it's also very important to remember that several things are not, like the focus on value for money, like the importance of relationships, like the importance of keeping your customers close to you and constantly listening to them. But we don't talk about that a lot on radio or on sessions like this, because it is the same as ever. So it's important to, as well as, yes, keep, an eye on the trend and what's changing. Also make sure that the core of what you've got, make sure that you are the same as ever too.
I think that's great advice just for whoever asked that question, and whoever is, whether you B2B or B2C, know, well, B2C especially, as you say, know where they sit on that case shape, know where your customer is, because The question was cheap and badly made. That's very different to quality. And yeah, okay, super. Thank you, Susan. What mistakes do businesses most commonly make when we're setting prices during times like this, with uncertain economic periods?
I think my answer to this is going to be the mistake that I think businesses make in terms of pricing at all.
Yeah,
Because it depends on where you're at in a business. Like when you're starting off, you're so focused on getting the first sale. A lot of businesses don't sell it on a profitable basis at all. They just want to get the business in. They want a bit of validation that what they're doing is right. And also, when it's only you, you tend to think, okay, well, look, I'm happy to put in, let's say you might be quoting 3 hours for something. I'm happy to put in 10 again to hold on to the first customer. And look, that's grand at the beginning. But when, as time goes on, and certainly when you employ staff, that doesn't work. So that's why I'm saying it depends on where you're at. Then certainly as time moves on, I think it's very important to be very clear and systematic about your pricing. And so that is where I think businesses need to be, is thinking about this the same way that they would think about any strategic element of the business. So my answer to you is the same whether it's in uncertain economic periods or otherwise, which is have a pricing model. And I'll tell you the three that we use. So the first one is the one you'd most likely expect someone like me to say, which is called cost plus. So let's just say I made this coffee cup. Like cost plus is when you think about the glass that's involved, you look at the branding and the plastic, that's the rubber band here that's around it. You think about how much does it cost me to market this, but also factoring in other prices as well, like my accountant's fees, like my fees, let's say from a legal point of view, etc. Right? So let's just say it costs me everything costs me €5 to make this, and then cost plus means I'd add on a margin. Let's say I might now sell it for 7.50. So as a result, I'm making 2.50 on the €5 that it costs me. And as a result, then for every one of these that I sell, I'm taking in 7.50 at the top, 2.50 is left at the bottom, and away I go. And making sure then as the price of something increases, maybe it's the cost of the lass, maybe it's the cost of the accountant, maybe it's the cost of me, maybe it's the cost of staff. Always making sure that if I want to preserve my 250 margin, that then we increase the price accordingly. And that's often you'll hear that particularly in a product based business where those types of costs are very clear. You know, I will get an invoice for so much glass, etc. But that's one example. And we do that. I have a database, and it's a live one that I use all the time, where we're constantly looking at the real time price increases to make sure that we can preserve that margin. The second one is far less used and is only conducive in an environment, I think, where you're in a B2B, business to business, a very relationship heavy business. And secondly, where you can easily compete in a way that's different to others. So I've coined this term myself, as demand-based costing. So this is where, Lewis, I would say to you, let's say in this case, I'm a wedding planner. Not a business I'm in, not a business I've ever bought from, but let's just say I would imagine a wedding planner might be somebody that can really differentiate themselves from another wedding planner. And the first question that I would imagine a wedding planner might ask when it comes to budget is like, how much do you want to spend? And let's say one person might say, well, I'm happy to spend €25,000 on a wedding. Another person might say, I'm happy to spend 50,000. Another person says, I want to spend 10. And then building in the costs accordingly. That's what I mean by demand-based costing, is say, what's our budget here? And then let me figure it out from there. Then we go back to the venue. Then we go back to the band. Then we go back to all of the others along the way. And I think businesses can shy away from asking that question early on. So, of course, if I was to reach out to a wedding planner, of course I would ask, well, how much do you charge? And I think it's a mistake to answer that question directly with a number. Whereas
Okay.
instead, I think it should reciprocally go back. Now, if like I was down earlier on, I went out for my thinking breakfast. As you know, I do that every day, where I go out for an hour to think every morning. And when I walked into the cafe this morning, they didn't say to me, Susan, what's your budget? And then we'll see what breakfast we'll make it. It doesn't work in every scenario. But there is a lot of service-based businesses where businesses are too quick to say, we charge X, as opposed to having that conversation about, well, what's your budget for this? And certainly there's some elements of our business that's very conducive to that. We do it all the time. And sometimes people will say, well, look, we need to kind of get your pricing and so on like that. And sometimes they'll push back. And fair enough, then you might need to take it in a different direction. But by not putting that forward, first of all, you can maybe be pricing something on the basis of a 25,000 euro or 2.5 grand budget. And it could be twice as high. So if you don't know, then you can't factor that real piece of information into your pricing. And then the third one, Larissa, this again does depend on where you're at. The third one is market research. Is perhaps I would always do cost plus anyway. I think it's always important to know what your costs are. Otherwise, you could involuntarily be operating at a loss. And losses can creep in without you noticing, whether it is too much of your own time, whether it is increased cost creep. There's ways and means that can happen. But then market research is another one. And SaaS, I'm back to the SaaS businesses or tech businesses, even your own business. Like a lot of accounting businesses. Now, in my mind, your business has evolved from like that pure send in your receipts and we'll create a set of accounts, transactional sort. Like Kinore has really changed from that from when I've gotten to know you. So I don't mean to compare Kinore's business to others, but say the accounting sector. A lot of companies will publish their pricing, or indeed lots of companies, if you ring them up and you know, on a mystery shopping point of view and say, I'm starting off, I have this amount of turnover, I have this amount of customers, what sort of a price would you give me? And certainly for anybody who's here today or watching the recording, any of you that have been using the trading online voucher, it's now a different name, but any of you that have been taking the trading online voucher from the Leo over the past 10 years, I think at this stage, or at least 6, you'll know that the Leo was saying go out and get 3 quotes so that you can compare. So of course, reciprocally, that can also operate. Maybe I'm in a business where I can conduct market research and where I can see what my competitors are charging. And then I say, well, where am I? You know, do I go up or down? Am I, you know, if I'm Kinore and I'm adding more value than that traditional type of transactional accountant, I might charge more. If it is, on the other hand, that I want to absolutely strip out the basics, strip it down to the basics, strip out the relationship, strip out the having the chats, strip out the call us if you have a problem and just upload X and we'll generate Y, well, then you might say, right, well, then I'm going to charge less. So having a pricing model, and we use all three, where you've got your costs plus, where you've got in when it's appropriate, asking what's your budget and building your costs from there. And thirdly, your market research. Having a pricing model matters. And then the last thing that I'll say on that is that this isn't one and done. This can't be like, we'll do that at the beginning and then you just don't anymore. I have, again, this is something you'll know from our conversations over the years, but I put in a slot with my time with my accounts, not just my accountant, I do that as well, but time for me to analyze pricing and analyze all sorts of other things to do with our accounts. I put that in my diary as I would a meeting with the accountant, where I turn up on time, where I'm prepared, and where I dedicate that time to where I analyze what's going on in the dashboards that we've built to then to impact decisions that are going to make later on. So again, in summary, 3 models: cost plus, demand-based costing, market research, and make sure you're doing it regularly.
Susan, thank you for that. And by the way, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A or the chat. Just before we move on, one question came in on what are the subtle differences if you're pricing for B2B versus B2C. So if you could maybe speak for just a few seconds on that.
Yep. One is B2B tends to be more relationship based anyway. And a lot of our business is B2B, Larissa. So you can have that conversation typically around demand-based costing. It's also important, like we're going through a round of price increases at the moment, and I can't just like up the price on the next invoice. You know, if I was in a B2C environment, let's say like I was this morning in the cafe, like somebody doesn't meet me at the door saying, Susan, just letting you know now in 6 months' time, we're going to increase prices of the coffee. Like the communication around pricing is important. The communication needs to be, it's not just that we're doing this, you need to say why. And in every case, in the price increase that we're doing at the moment, in every case I'm saying that. I'm also want to give them time to do that. You don't always have that on the B2C side. In addition as well, of course, margin matters. So in the case of a business to business environment, while relationships are so important, it's important also to measure how much customer support you're giving, because again, we can tend to say, look, call us if you've got any questions or call us if you've got any problems. And some customers, knowingly or unknowingly, can take advantage of that. And unknowingly sometimes too, let's be fair. So in that B2B environment, like that just call that you take and it takes half an hour, or you could have relationship creep as well, where you have to manage that. Whereas In reality, okay, somebody in the cafe this morning, they might be asked for the Wi-Fi password. They might ask them to stop and take a photograph. They might ask for an extra four, but they're not going to be there for an extra hour standing talking to someone. And if they are, well, then you've got a bigger problem. So that's where I mean is that you need to be more measuring of the costs where you're coming from. You need to be more communicative in the appropriate environment and watching out for that scope creep. The demand-based costing can operate on the B2B side. Also, now I'm making an assumption here, but based on the person's business, B2B, you typically need fewer customers when you do bigger deals. Whereas on the other side, when it's B2C, you typically need more customers and therefore your marketing tends to be, more, maybe more digital, more branding, more brand awareness. They're two totally different business models. Personally, I much prefer B2B. It suits me. It suits the business that we have built, the businesses that we have built. I'm a relationship person. I like people, and I'm absolutely there on the other end of the phone. And also then I keep saying things that you and I have referred to, and there's plenty of conversations publicly that people can see on that. But as you said to me one time, your business turns from I to we to them. And
Yeah.
managing that transition well in the context of a B2B business matters, where yes, you're there, but you're not abdicating the relationship, but you manage that transition. And that's very important as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just to add to the question on pricing, so I agree on the pricing models, definitely. And you said about continually looking at it and changing it. I would just add to that I see businesses sometimes are too slow to make those changes.
Yeah.
They're a little bit nervous about how, in both B2B and B2C, a little bit nervous about how their customer or client will react to a price increase. And so they tend to suffer it from a margin perspective instead. Or in some cases, in smaller businesses, they suffer their own time instead. So just to be mindful of that the making decisions quickly is a good thing because generally speaking, you're going to sacrifice in some other way if you don't do that. Okay. Third question is, where do you see the biggest opportunities for Irish businesses over the next 2 to 3 years?
Okay, first of all, on the cost side, I see huge productivity increase from agentic AI. I've seen it myself in our own company. I think this is one of the revolutions we're living through. And Larissa, you and I set up our businesses a couple of months apart. We've seen a lot of change over the years in so many ways. And there's the easy, memorable ones like coming out of the recession, the pandemic. But then there's also been more subtle ones as well. I think this is one of the big ones. I think agentic AI is changing everything. And so that's the first thing that I would do is that I would understand what that is. And nobody goes into a hardware shop and says, "Can I have a hammer?" and then goes at home looking for things to use with the hammer. And that's what I hear some people are doing with agentic AI is they're saying, "What tool should
Completely.
I use?" But people, you wouldn't do that. You think, right, I
It's a
have a
good
nail, I
analogy.
need to hit into the wall, and then you go into the hardware shop and you ask them, "What instrument can I use to do this?" So I think you need to think about like what can I automate? What problems have I got? What's repeatable? All of that. But this isn't an automation webinar. If it was, we'd be talking more about that. And you don't have to do this on your own. I mean, the Leo has so many supports, both financial as well as learning, as well as mentoring available to help you really think through this. And from our own perspective as well, what our project management software is ClickUp. And within ClickUp, what I started doing at the very beginning of the year, our strategy for this year is to scale the company's intelligence. And then I thought, okay, what technologies are we paying for that we can optimize the use of AI that they're creating through their tech stack back into the business. So I started going on a daily webinar for a while at the very, very beginning of the year, all around how to use super agents, which is their form of agentic AI. And I started building and testing and then bringing the staff on board about it and all that. And the productivity change has been enormous. But secondly, the second order effect then of that is then you need to think about, well, with the time that we're getting back or the resources that we're getting back, how do we put that to work? So it's not just about how do you save time, it's now how do you reuse it? Because if you have full-time staff, as we do, and you're now reducing, say, their workload from 100% on 75, you now have this opportunity and you need to think about how to maximize that 25%. So I think that's a massive change. And I think if you're starting from zero, I would go and get training on it from the Leo or Enterprise Ireland, or depending where you might be. I would also reach out to Data to Sustain, which is the data. The data management part of the ecosystem now within the enterprise ecosystem as well. It's based in Sligo. I would reach out to them, and also I would look at the tech stack that you have. Like if I was to go across the board and look at all the technologies that we use within the business, unless they're innovating within AI, they're just not going to be relevant. So go and take a look at the webinars or the video tutorials that they have. Like even our accounting software has this built in. So many others do as well. Now, the second thing I'd say is I think the ecosystem for helping businesses grow is getting better and better. If I go back to, let's say, the Leo, there's a big focus now on being lean, being green, and being digital. If I look at Enterprise Ireland, naturally enough, of course, there's a big focus there upon export and digitalisation. If you look at the country, there's more of a focus now towards decarbonisation. And I know we're talking the hottest day in 140 years. So
Is
there,
that really okay?
yep, there's a big focus on that. If we look at Enterprise Europe Network, that's connecting one into the ecosystem across not just Europe, but going further afield. If I look at Intertrade Ireland, it's about how to do more business north-south. I could go on and on. And I do think that there is more of the ecosystem today is better than it's ever been. And also it is more conducive now for every single type. If you're a one man or woman band all the way up to wherever, all the way up to might be. And the third thing I'll say is I'm very aware at the moment that we're getting a lot in Newstalk, we're getting a lot of pre-budget submissions being sent in. So we're in that, budget time frame where we're thinking about how does government strategically move the dial for various different factions of society. And last year we saw the entrepreneur tax relief. So for somebody who's selling a business, now capital gains tax is 10% up to 1.5 million. And there's a lot of pressure out there for the government to increase that. And I'm absolutely supportive of that because I think the tax that they're not going to get by putting up the rate is going to pale into significance of those who might think differently about where their business is going. So that's a carrot, but the stick here
Hmm.
is, Larissa, in the next 20 years, it is expected that 23 billion of business wealth will transfer between generations. And within that, you and I both know that we both know the skills that we've developed in the past 15 years of building businesses. It's not for everyone. And you can't just
Hmm.
walk into this and just know what to do. So when it comes to where that 23 billion is going to be transferred onto, there's big questions about who is going to inherit that, the skill set they have, the ambition they have, the even the shock. Of course, not everybody can time their death. Or sorry, that's the wrong thing to say. Not everybody knows how when can plan for that when it wouldn't just happen tragically or out of nowhere. So I think the third opportunity here for businesses now is we have more of an attractive, and it's not brilliant yet, but not an attractive form of succession planning. We've more role models, I would say, like your good self, in how to buy businesses. We have more role models in those who are selling businesses that we can now hear from those. And I think and also the environment at which Ireland is now getting to a stage of where there's more mature, and mature by the definition of those who have them, mature businesses that are in a position to sell and be passed on is greater than ever. So I think that agentic AI is going to revolutionize the cost side. I think the ecosystem can help everybody, and I mean everybody now. And I think succession planning is more tax efficient than ever, and we've more people to talk to about it than ever, and it's become more of a conversation than ever. And the intergenerational wealth transfer is a great opportunity for Ireland if we embrace it, but it can go wrong if it surprises us.
Fantastic. Great answer. Thank you, Susan. Susan, we have two questions in, right? And we have 1 minute. So you've got like
Okay.
very quick answers to these questions, and I think you'll be able to answer them very quickly. The first one is, how soon should you discuss pricing in a B2B pitcher relationship?
Oh, now, I mean, pricing should be one of the very first things you do. It affects everything. It affects how much you get in. It affects how many customers you can take on. It affects everything. I would say how soon is now. If you haven't thought about pricing models, do it today. And secondly, how soon should you communicate that you're increasing your price? I would say like 6 months is a good time frame, but it also, like in our case, one of the businesses where we're conducting this, things are going to start happening again in September. I'm communicating that now, so but it would, if I did it any earlier, it would have just been inappropriate in the time frame. So I would say discussing price increases with your customers like a couple of months before you actually implement it.
With B2B, I would say whenever you start the relationship, one of the first things you talk about is price, or scope, or but refer to budget or pricing all the time, and have it built in, depending on the sector you're in, at least having a conversation every year. Sometimes if the economy is steady, pricing relationships can go on for years with no change. We see that in our sector a lot. So it really depends where you're at, but certainly, definitely a couple of months in advance of any change. The second question, Susan, how much attention have you paid to alerting your clients that you were using AI tools which could be compromising their data protection?
All right. We take great care of that. Really, really great care. For a start, so I have a note taker that comes into me in every meeting. I always like it appears as a person and there's a message. So I've automatically tools built in there. So that's the only time that might be happening. In terms of agentic, an awful lot of what we do with agentic AI is internal. So and this is a very important point, is that the AI that we use, like we don't use like ChatGPT or Claude or anything like that, but it's all locked into the business. So it's super important as well that the minute you mention AI, that you also talk about cybersecurity and indeed data protection. So very upfront, customers know when we're using it. And another thing is when it drafts something, I would never send out something that is drafted by AI directly to a client. There's no way this is designed to draft from a generative point of view. So very much so, very, very upfront on it. But it is removing the repeatable work that's being done. It's certainly not replacing the very important layer. And for sure, when it comes to deleting data appropriately, like whether it is awareness or management, we take that absolutely very seriously. And you have to, and thank you for asking that question to that person.
Yeah, and we do have to, and it will be even more serious over the coming months when we have the new EU AI Act coming into
Yes.
play,
Yeah.
I think in 2027. So this will get even more topical. Okay, Susan, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time this morning. Tell us where to contact you, and how to find you.
Okay, so anybody that would like to know anything about anything that I've spoken about there, so I write a blog on thepositiveeconomist.com, and I'm taking stock is on Newstalk every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. So the podcasts are there. We actually did cover a couple of weeks ago, Larissa, about the EU AI Act on the show. So please do feel free to reach out, and of course as well, the main website is hayesculleton.com. People can see all of what we do there too.
Susan, thank you so much. And for us, you'll find us at Kinore.com. If you have any questions at all, you can find how to get in touch with us there. Susan, have a great day. Enjoy the hottest day of the year, everybody. And thanks so much. And there's Pat saying excellent call. Well done, Susan, as always. And thanks so much, everybody. We appreciate having you here this morning. Have a great day. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Larissa.